Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna try to hook up Formik with Material UI form elements. So this is kind of like what we're gonna build here. Let me just warn you guys, this is not a tutorial video on Formik. So if you have never tried Formik before, please check out my other video. I made a small series on the introduction to Formik. I try to explain my best why Formik is useful in that video and show you guys how to set up a form. In that video, we set up a login form, not a sign up form. So please check that one out. It links in the description below. But today, this is what we're gonna make right here. A pretty basic sign up form. So the point of this video is not about Formik, but it's about how to hook up Formik with an external components that has inputs and selects and things like that. In this case, Material UI. So let me just show you guys what's going on here. Let me refresh the page. All right, so we got basic validations. Like notice this submit button's disabled right now. I can't click it. And if I type stuff here, notice we got a nice Material UI element right here. Here is a text field. If I don't put enough characters, it warns me, hey, look, it's too short. But if I put enough, no warnings. And if I make it empty, it says required. So it has validation. So this is all done by Formik. But what I have done is I hooked up Formik's error handling with Material UIs, showing this error message here. This right here is all done by Material UI right here. We also have a select field right here. Whoops, not sure what happened there. But we have a select field. I think it's because I'm zoomed in. Yeah. We have a select field and you could choose. This is also required. Notice when I chose this one, let me show you guys again. I wrote something here and I chose something here. Now it's enabled. So now I could click and it shows you the result of my form. So this is what I want to make. So again, the point of this video is to show you guys how I would approach hooking up Formik with Material UI. Let's get started. So I'm on an empty folder right now. I call this folder Formik Material UI, but this is completely optional. Let's get started by first creating a React app. So I'm gonna make a TypeScript React app. So the current tradition, the current way of doing that is npx. Let me zoom in just a little bit more. npx create React app. Since I already made a folder, I'm just gonna say make it in this folder. And then otherwise you would normally put your folder name here, but I'm just gonna put it in this folder. And to make it a TypeScript create React app, we are gonna do that -- template TypeScript. Now this is gonna take some time to load. I'm gonna pause the video here and just let it finish loading. I'm also gonna install ESLint and Prettier setup because I just can't code without that. That's completely optional though, so do that if you want, or you could just choose not to do so. So mine finished loading and I also installed Prettier on mine, but again, that's completely optional. Let's just make sure that everything's installed correctly. So I'm gonna, on my terminal, on my root directory, let me zoom in for you guys. Let's just clear this mess for now. Okay, on my terminal, let's write npm start to start our app. And let's just make sure that everything has worked properly. Still loading. There we go. So if everything is working, you should be seeing this thing right here. But obviously we don't want to show this. So go to your source directory. Let me just make this into a split screen. Go to your source folder. We're gonna get rid of all the stuff that we don't need. So we don't need, let's see, logo, we don't need. What else do we not need? We don't need logo, React app env.d.ts, service worker, and setup test. We don't need these 4 files right here. So I'm just gonna delete them. Our app's gonna break. Go to your index. Let me zoom in for you guys. And we don't need this import for the service worker. We don't need this service worker register down here. Let's get rid of that. And let's go to our app. I'm on my app.tsx. We no longer have this import because this logo because we deleted it. So let's get rid of that import. And we don't need this image because we don't have the image anymore. And now we are left with this. Okay, so from here, I'm gonna clean it up a little bit more, but I'm gonna do something a little different. So go back to your index. We're gonna move our app, but it's probably just easier just to erase our app file and then make a new one. So I'm just gonna highlight these three: app CSS, app.test.tsx, and app.tsx, and get rid of all of them. And then I am gonna make a folder within my source directory called components, lowercase components. Yeah, so I'm gonna make a folder called capital app. That will be where my app component is contained. Let's create an index.tsx file in there. And I'm gonna put the boilerplate import React from React. Let's see, const app, and we got a type bar function here. It's gonna be a React functional component, react.fc for functional component, and our type of our props. So this is where we usually type our props, but our app won't have any props, so we won't have that here. And we are just gonna put an empty one because we don't have props. And let's just return a div with the class name app, capital app. And let's just write hello here. And export default app. So now let's import this, going back to our index file. Let's import this guy in here. So our app component is no longer within the same folder, but it's actually within our components folder, and going to app. That's where our app resides. Yep, and now we see this hello here. Hopefully you guys can see that here. I just want to add a little bit more styling to it. So what I'm gonna do is, let's go to our index.css. This white is kind of blinding my eyes. So go to your body and let's put a background color. And I had this written down somewhere because I like this color. It's actually the React color in the React website. It's let me zoom in for you guys. 20222A. Let's try that out. So this is probably better. Obviously we can't read our text, but that's fine for now. Just for now, let's just put color white here just so that we can read the text. There we go. All right, so another thing that I always like doing in my CSS file is I like using select all, put a select all selector, CSS selector here, and let's make every element. The box sizing will make it a border box. I don't like the standard content box. I like border boxes. I think a lot of you guys will agree with me. All right, so now we have the basic app setup. Let's get Material UI in here. So I'm on the Material UI's official website. Links in the description below, but it's pretty much just material-ui.com. And just to install it, I'm gonna read their documentation by clicking here. And it just tells us just to npm install @material UI/core. So let's follow the directions. Go to our terminal. Let's see, I'm gonna make a new terminal here. All right, now I'm gonna follow their directions. npm install @material UI /core. When I install that, and it also says here, Material UI was designed with the Reusable Form in mind. Be sure to follow these instructions. Let's follow that link. And I am going to install Reusable Form with this npm install here. So let's follow that here. npm install, and I is install for short for npm. Typeface Reusable. You don't need to click write the save. I'm just gonna write it like that. And then it says, then you can import it in your entry point. So our entry point is index, and here we will import. I'm gonna import it before the CSS file. Import typeface roboto. And then let's just keep in mind what our app looks like. It looks like this right now. I am going to go to my body here, my CSS index.css. Now, within the font family, you guys might have this or maybe not, but I already have roboto in here. Roboto. I don't know how to say that word. But I'm just going to bring this over and put it as my first font. That way it will use that font here. I don't know if you saw the change, but now we are using roboto font, the font that Google wants us to use. And let's see if that is the case. I'm going to go to my computed value and see my font family, and it says roboto right here. So we have that set up. Now let's get Formik set up. All right, so before we add Formik, let's do a little bit of styling. So I'm not dealing with everything shoved up on the top left corner like this. So what I'm gonna do is to my body, I'm gonna put margin not of 0, but of 50 pixels. Let's see if that helps up at all. A little bit. Another thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make my body a flexbox, because the content that's inside the body, which is the app component, and I want to put that in the center. So the way that I'm gonna do that is display is flex and justify content will be center. So that made it here. Okay. Now, what else can we do? I am going to go to my components, go to my app folder, make a new file here called capital app.css. So this will be the CSS file that accompanies my app component. And I'm gonna make a class called capital app, and we will say this one has a background color. Just a background of white. And let's put a border radius of maybe 10 pixels. I might change my mind later. And let's set a width of 500 pixels. Let's see what that gives us. Also a padding of 50 pixels. I'm just kind of making these up on the fly. We have to import our CSS file within our app component. So let's put import app.css, and we already named the app, so that's fine. Now the color, we can't see anything anymore, but that's because within our source index CSS, our outer CSS, we set the white as color, as white. So let's get rid of that line now. All right, now we see the hello here. Hopefully you guys can see that. So I think this is good enough. And now let's go ahead and install Formik. So we're gonna install Formik. By the way, this is the Formik website. And to do that, you just do npm I Formik. Let's wait for that to finish. Now, little later, we're also gonna use their validation feature. And they ask us to install this yup npm package here. That's what Formik uses to do their validation. So that's what we're gonna do. However, we also, because we're using TypeScript, I also want to install the types file of the type package for the yup. So you do that by doing @types /yup. So install both yup and @types/yup. We don't need to install a types file for Formik because Formik natively is built within TypeScript, using TypeScript. So it comes with its own types. All right, so those have installed correctly. All right, so let's connect Formik to our form right here. And let me just zoom in on this Chrome browser. I don't know why I didn't do this before. So here we're zoomed in, and I'm also at the Formik website. And by the way, if you start hearing some piano or something in the background, I'm not trying to set the mood for this video. It's just my neighbors playing piano. So sorry about that in advance. But let's just get the basic Formik setup here. Now, keep in mind, this is not a Formik tutorial video. So if something's here confused you, please check out my other video, please. I will explain it there in more detail. But let's just follow the basic format. So I'm gonna first import, by the way, I'm on the app index.tsx. Let's import Formik. These are named imports, and form from Formik. So if you're not familiar with this form, either watch my other tutorial or I'll just briefly explain it here. All right, so let's try to make this a little bit more similar to what we had before. So to get us started, let's just first add a h1 tag that says SignUp. There we go. Now I want to add the two fields here, but I'm not going to use Material UI yet. I just want to have the basic form set up first using standard HTML because it's going to take a little bit to build up each of the inputs. And we have two inputs that we're building. One is a text field and one is a select. So we're going to do that one by one. But let's just use basic HTML elements first. So looking at their website, we got to first have this outer Formik component shell, which I will do right now. Now this requires two parameters. If you look at my web storm, it's complaining to me right now with these red squiggly lines. So the first thing it needs is initial values. This is a required prop and it takes in an object. However, instead of building the object inline like this, what they have here, let me zoom in here. I don't like that actually. Let me just zoom in like this. So instead of having an inline value here, why don't we declare our initial value outside of our component? So, and because we are using TypeScript right now, let's type things properly. So I'm gonna first make an interface for the values of my form. And I will call these form values interface. So this will kind of be the type for our form, if you will. Now we have two fields, if you remember. The first one was a name, which is a string and required. The second one is I will call position. So I don't know if you saw from my other video, but I mean not the other video, a couple minutes ago. The second was a select, input select, and you select the position that you want, front end, back end, blah, blah, blah. So this will also be a string. Now let's declare our initial values that we will place here. We're gonna make an object here. So I'm gonna call it const initial values. This will be an object. It will have a name key with the initial value of an empty string and also a position of an empty string. All right, so now that we, oh, by the way, we know the type of this, right? So it's just gonna be form values. All right. Now we're gonna give form values to our Formik initial values. And the second requirement, the second required props that Formik has is on submit. So again, instead of having an inline function like they have in this example here, we are just gonna make some BS method here. I'm gonna call it const handle submit. Now, Formik automatically injects the form values as our parameter. So I will call these values. Let me just finish making the thing like that. And this will take the shape, the type of our form values. It will give us back the name and the position, whatever we have typed into our input. And the result of this function is going to be a void function. It doesn't really do anything, returns nothing. And now, when they click submit, what I want to do is I want to alert the user with the JSON.stringified version of our form values. So this will kind of show them what they have entered, hopefully. Now let's put that in our on submit, handle submit. All right, so what do we do now? We are done with Formik for now. Later, we're gonna add a validation schema, but that's not now. We'll do that in a little bit. Now we put a little context thing inside here. This is all boilerplate of Formik. So put a little curly braces here. It has a props as a parameter. And we're gonna return. So they use the lowercase standard HTML form and reconnect on submit with props handle submit. Very tedious. Fortunately, for a Formik comes with this capital form that automatically connects the handle submit with our form element. So that's what we're going to use here. So all you got to do is use the capital form that we have imported above here earlier. And that has pretty much replaced this line here. So that's all that capital form does. It's just a little bit of a convenience factor. Now we're going to put our two inputs. However, before we put our inputs, let's use the capital field that Formik also comes with. So let's import that first. And by the way, I have shown, I have used this component here in my other video, if you're interested. Now, what this field component pretty much does is let me go back to my other example, this other example here. You gotta do a lot of things in the standard HTML input, right? You gotta add an on change, you gotta add maybe optionally an on blur and the value. This is how you make a connected component in React. We don't wanna do that, so Formik automatically does that for us if we use the field component right here. So let's use that here. Capital field. Now this will require a couple of things. Let's see. Let's first give it a name, and this will be our name field. And what type are we gonna do? Let's say this is gonna be a type of input. It's gonna be a standard input. And what else do we need? Do we need anything else? Maybe not. Let me just save and see what we have. So we got this basic thing. Let's put a label there. Why not, huh? So I'm just gonna make a div here for now. Div. Again, terrible styling, but I don't care because I'm gonna replace it with Material UI later. And I'm gonna put a label here. Label. And let's call this name. Like so. All right, so that's looking a little better. Now let's put a select field. So how do we put a select field? Do they show us? Yeah, I think I was there just now. This one. I'm not sure if I did this type right. I think this should have been as. So that's a new property that Formik version 2 comes with. It's telling either a React component or the name of an HTML element to render. So when we write as input, we are telling Formik to render this field as an input HTML input field. Later, we're gonna convert that to Material UI, but right now it's just using input field. By the way, I don't like this autocomplete, so let's turn that off. This is purely preference. That way I don't have this annoying drop down here. All right, so the second field that I need, let's copy this div here. We're gonna make another div, and this will be our select. So I'm gonna call this position, and not as an input anymore, but as a select. Now, and by the way, the name of this is gonna be position. How do we use this? I'm just gonna copy their example here. I'm on the Formik website. And let's put a placeholder too. Placeholder, and choose your position. And I don't want a closing tag because I want to put stuff inside. So let's put a closing tag of the field like so. And we're gonna put a couple options in here. Lowercase, whoops. Not sure what's going on, sorry. I'm using the Mac keyboard and I always make mistakes on this. I got the new butterfly keyboards and I'm not a big fan, to be honest. So option, value, we're gonna say front end. Front end, this is what we're gonna display. Let's copy this. Maybe make 3 more. Next one's gonna be back end. This value here is what gets put into our form values. And this is what we display to the user here. But I'm sure most of you guys know that already. And then we have DevOps. By the way, that piano again, it's not me trying to set the mood of this video. If you hear it, if you don't, then that's good. But it's just my neighbor playing piano right now. And what else do we have? We have QA. All right, now let's see what we have. All right, so we got this ugly form here, but at least, at least it works. Now let's put our button that will submit the form. Right below our second div here, let's put a button type submit as a text. Let's see what that did. All right, so let's see if our handle submit is connected. I'm gonna put my name is Justin and I'm currently a front-end engineer. Submit. It says here name, Justin, position, nothing. So my position is actually not connected. So why is that? Let's see what they did here. Field name is position. Autocomplete. Maybe I don't need this autocomplete for the select, so I'm gonna erase that from the position. So actually the form is connected. Let me show you guys again. Let me refresh. If I write something here, the position is empty. I can't really zoom into this little modal here, so sorry if you can't see, but right now it says position is empty. But it's not that our position is not connected, because if I click backend or something else, for example, now it shows us. But what we did is we didn't provide an initial value here. So maybe we could just make another option here with an empty. And this will have the value of an empty string. And that way, that way it starts out as empty, and now we gotta choose one, right? So maybe that's better. All right, so now we got something going on. So we got the basic form set up. Again, it looks very ugly, and we're gonna introduce Material UI later, but let's set up the validation too. I just want to get all of this set up so that later we could just purely focus on making components that connects Material UI with Formik. And by the way, my ambition and my goal for this is we're going to make components or reusable components, components that hook up Formik with Material UI, so that whenever we call on that element, like here, we're going to replace this div and this div here with its Material UI input and Material UI select. And I want to give as little props as I need to as possible so that it's very convenient to use. That is my goal with this video. But before we do that, let's just get the validation set up. I'm going to go back to my Formik website, not my Formik website, but the Formik website. Go to validations here. And we just have to import yup and have the schema set up here. So hopefully you guys are used to using yup. If not, please check out my other video where I make the sign in form. I use yup there and I explain to you guys what is going on. So we're going to import all as yup from yup. Now let's make our validation schema outside of our component. I'm going to call it const sign up schema like that. Sign up schema. Yup.object.shape. Put an object inside here. We have a name, which is a yup.string. And we will have maybe min2 like them, and we'll say too short as our error message. Now, this will also be required. Required. A second key is position, yup.string, and this will only have required, like that. Now, how do we connect this schema to our Formik? Is we put it as another additional prop here as validation schema. This will be our form, what do we call it? Sign up schema. Let me use prettier on that a little bit. It's giving me an error, but that's just a typo. All right, let's see what we have now. And I am going to, from these props, hopefully you guys are familiar with what this props is. Formik gives us a couple of things to use, props to use. I'm just going to destructure the ones that I need. So the only ones I need, I think, is dirty and is valid. Dirty, check to see if the form has been tampered with anyway, meaning have they touched the form or not. Is valid just tells us it's a true or false, tells us if the form is valid or not. So let's destructure that from our props, Formik props, dirty and is valid. Now I'm gonna disable our submit button, and it will be disabled if it's either not dirty, meaning no one has ever touched the form, has edited any value to it, or it's not valid, like so. So right now, I don't know if you see, but that's disabled. I cannot click this. It will become enabled when we have satisfied the criteria. So again, remember we put the minimum of 2 length for our name. If we put 1, bam, it's disabled. So that seems to work. Now we just want to show our error messages here, right? So how do we do that? We go to our field. Fortunately, Formik comes with another helper component, which is called the error message. This will make it easy for us to show errors. So let's import it from Formik here, error message. And let's just, again, not gonna be pretty, just put below our fields, I'm gonna use the error message. We gotta give it a name, and this one will have a name of our field, which is name. And I'm gonna copy this, bring it right below our second select field, and this one have a name of position. Let's see if that works now. If I tab out of it, it says required, good. If I do that, it's now too shortened. So it's telling us the error message, so that's good. All right, so this is the form without Material UI. We have set up everything we need to do here. Now we're gonna make two components. One component that replaces this name field right here, this input, render input, and we will use a Material UI input for that, and we will use a Material UI select for our position field here. This will be a little bit harder than the other one, but it is possible, and I will try to do my best to show you guys here. I'm gonna start by making this name, making a render input that is a Material UI text field. Let's go to the Material UI's website. And by the way, from now on, I'm gonna be jumping back and forth between this Material UI website and Formik. And if you're kind of impatient, sorry in advance. I just have to do this because there's just so much things involved. Let's open up this little menu here. Go to the components. It's this one. And the one that we want is a text field under inputs. And so they have a couple different ones here. Hopefully you guys can see this. I'm just gonna go with this standard one here. Now, how do we see the code? You click this little show the full source. And by the way, you could either select JavaScript or TypeScript. I'm gonna choose TypeScript, although it doesn't really matter in our case because we're not gonna be using their crazy TypeScript stuff here. But for us, let's go ahead within our components folder under our source directory. Right now, we just have app in here. I'm gonna make another component here. And I thought long and hard about what to name this. I am just going to name this Formik field. Now, yes, it's gonna be a Material UI field, but it's gonna be connected with Formik, meaning without Formik, this component is useless. This component that we are making right now would just be for Formik. I mean, yes, it will have the Material UI element, so I guess we could have called it Formik Material UI field, but that's just a little bit too verbose for me. So let's just call it Formik field. As always, let's put an index.tsx file in here, and I might style it a little bit later, so I'm gonna make a CSS file here too, called formikfield.css. And I'm in the formikfield.css. I'm just gonna make Formik field class later. I'm just gonna make this empty for now. Let's go back to our Formik field index. As always, let's write, and I'm gonna keep this open. As always, let's write import React from React. And what else do we need right now? Let's just do that right now. Const Formik field. Now this component will have props, so I'm gonna type it a little bit later, but for now we'll just leave it empty. I'll put props here for now, and let's just return a div with the class name of Formik field, and I'm gonna say Formik field. I just want to connect this and display this on our UI just so that it works. Export default Formik field. All right, now let's see if we could see this. Oh, he's giving me a TypeScript error. I'm just gonna make this empty for now. Let's see if we can import this to our app file and use it. So I'm back in my app file. Let's import Formik field from ..Formik field. Okay, so let's bring this here. I don't want to erase. I know that we're going to replace these input fields here with our Material UI ones, but I don't want to do that now because I want to use them as reference. So right below our name, I'm going to put our Formik field, which obviously is not a field right now. It just says Formik field, but at least we know that it's working properly, right? So let's see. Let's go back to Material UI here and let's see what they did. So I'm gonna pretty much copy this for now. So let's go back to our Formik field, put some new lines within our div, and what we need is text field, and we have to import this first from Material UI. So Material UI has this pretty crazy componentized, is that a word? Way of importing things, but you could just copy it here from here, paste it here, and so we're importing text field from Material UI.core/core/text field, and let's just paste, not a paste, but we'll just use the text field within our two divs, div tags field. Let's just see if that works. Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to my page, and now we see this thing. So it looks pretty good. It does that little Material UI shush, this blue shush thing. Let's put a label here. And by the way, I knew that it accepts label because we also have label here. And I'm gonna call my label name. Now look at that. We have name. When you click it, it goes up like that's a pretty cool effect, right? And it stays up there, but if it's empty, it comes back down. That's pretty cool. I wonder how they stylize that. Whatever. All right, so however, we're not interested in hard coding our label like name like this. We want to accept it as a prop because remember, we're trying to make a reusable Formik field component where whenever you need a text field component that connects with Formik, you're going to use this form element here, this component here. So as always, because we're dealing with TypeScript, let's type our props. So I'm going to call this interface Formik field props. The first prop that I know we'll need is a label. This will be required and it will be a string. So I'm gonna put props here. By the way, now let's type our Formik field functional component by putting brackets here and calling it Formik field props. Oh, sorry, that's not how you type it actually. You gotta put colon here and put react.functional component FC and then put the props like that. Okay, so I like destructuring my props first. I guess we could do it here too. So let's do that. And I'm gonna destructure just the props that we need. And instead of using label here and hard coding the word name here, let's use the label that we get from our props like so. Now we gotta go back to our app. If you notice, we have an error here because it has a required property of label. It is required because we didn't put a question mark here. So let's give it a label and we will call this name. As a matter of fact, just to test it to make sure it works, I'm gonna call it test. See if we got test as our label. There we go. So it's working. Let's change this back to name. And we have that. I kind of want this to go all the way to the end. It's kind of short for me. So I'm just going to look through Material UI and see if they have something that goes all the way, kind of like this one. So how did they do that? Or this one, right? It goes all the way. How did they? Oh, full width. Full width can be used to make the input take of the full width of this container. So how did they use that here? Full width right here. It's just a Boolean value, a property that's a Boolean value. So let's call this text field full width. Let's see if that works. Yep, that worked. And just so that I don't like autocomplete, not that it's doing it right now, but let's write autocomplete off. Okay. And let's capitalize our name as a prop that we're passing in. So where did it go? Right here. Let me just put some space around here. Let's use capital name instead. So that looks a little better, right? And so again, keep in mind that we're making Material UI form element show up right now. However, we're not connecting it to Formik yet. Meaning, if we type something here right now, Formik has no idea what we typed. So we want to fix that one by one. But let me just see if we need something. We do not. So now I'm going to go ahead and try to make this connected to Formik. So going back to my Formik field, let me zoom out just a little bit. Hopefully you guys can see. Now I'm going to do something. It may be a little confusing, but bear with me. I'm going to use this capital field prop that we used before. Do you remember this? It pretty much injects the on change, on blur, and the value of the field into this field. And that's what we want to use. And the property that we're going to use to connect this input with Material UI is our as property that we used before. So this as property doesn't just accept a string, but it also accepts components. And we're going to give it the component textField. Let's see if that will work. So I'm going to comment this out right now, and I'm going to import first field from React, and within our outer div, let's put that capital field here, and we are going to render this as textField, like so. Let's see if that works. So no, it did not work. Import field from React. I'm not sure why I wrote React here. It should be Formik. Sorry about that. All right, so we got this kind of crazy thing going on. It says object to object. However, you can see that this that Material UI is here, right? So that's good, I guess. Now, how do we pass? Remember, we passed a couple properties to our text field, such as autocomplete and label and full width. Whatever properties you write here in our field, it also gets passed to our component that we are rendering this as. So I could just write autocomplete off here, put a label of label and full width. Let's see if that works. Refresh the page, and I am still getting object. And the reason why that's happening is I didn't give it a name property. For field, we have to give it a name because Formik doesn't know which value this field is associated with. So one of the required properties of field is name, and so we have to pass that down as a prop. So I'm going to put name is a required value, and it's a string. Let's destructure that from our props and put name as name, like so. Now we got to go back to our app and give it a name. I'm not sure if Formik is going to complain to us because we have two fields now that has the name of name. Maybe, maybe not, but it seems like it's working. So do you see how it's connected now? Oh, but look, they are connected. Do you see that? Whenever I type something here, it gets over here because the value that they are connected to is the same one. So that's good. So we got that set up. Now, check this out. If we only have one word, it says too short here, right? How do we display the error message for our Material UI element here? The way that I am going to do that is I'm back on my Material UI. I don't know why I keep saying my Material UI. And do you guys see there's some important text stuff here? I am going to try to do that for us. I'm looking at the source code. I'm gonna try to find some important text. Yes, right here, helper text. So they use this property called helper text to display those texts. So how am I gonna do that? I'm gonna pass it down as another property to our field. call it helper text. Remember, he will pass it along to the text field component. And let's just write test here to see if that works. So it works right here. And I kind of don't like how this is so squished up here. So I'm going to go to my formikfield.css and I'm going to give it, let's see, a margin. Let's write 10 pixels, 0 pixels. So 10 top, up and bottom, 0 left and right. That doesn't seem to work because we did not import our CSS file within our Formik field. So import, same folder, formikfield.css. We already called it class field Formik field. Yeah, so that gives us a little bit more space, right? A breathable space. All right, so the test works, the error works, so that's good. However, we don't want to hard code the error message. We could also, again, use the error message component that Formik comes with. And for our helper text, we know that if you go to our Formik website, go to the error message, this pretty much gives you back a string. This gives you back a string. So the only thing we gotta pass to it, just like we did before within our app, just pass it a name. So helper text is gonna be an error message with the name of name prop that we're getting passed down. Like so. Let's see if that works. So right now, no errors, but however, if I just use one character, it says too short. If it's empty, it says required, and blah, 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 blah. Now, so that's our error messages is showing using Material UI's helper text. I also want to do something else. This is not required. I just saw it right now. It looks kind of nice, I think. Do you see how it says here required? Now, how did they do that? Let's see. Because I know that our values are required too, right? Oh, they use this required keyword here. I think that will put the asterisks. Let's see if that works. Let's put required here. Oh, and now we got this little asterisk. So I guess that's the only, this property pretty much just only puts the asterisks here. But I guess it looks nice, right? And it lets the user know that it is required, which it is in our case. So that's nice. All right, so I believe our Formik field is done. So let's erase this old text field here. And I think it looks pretty good. And before I go on, I want to do one minor detail thing. So the goal of this Formik field component here was to make it reusable. And right now it is very reusable. So let me give you guys an example. By the way, let's erase our old div here. This one. I don't want this ugly input anymore. So let's get rid of that. And look how neat this looks. We got this one Formik field component here that all we gotta pass it is a name and the label. Very clean, right? We could even make a couple of these. Like for example, we could do that. We could write email here and password here. Label will be email and label will be password. So look how neat that looks. Ignore that. It's very easy to use, right? So, however, to make this really reusable, I think we gotta do one more thing. For passwords, usually you don't want to show what you're typing in right here, right? You want to hide that. So typically how we do that in a standard HTML form element input field is a type. So I want to give another property to our Formik field called type. Now this will be an optional prop and it will be a string. And the reason why it's optional is because I'm going to default the type as input field. So type, and I'm having a little bit of brain fart right now. Was it called input? No, it's called text field. The default type that we're going to have is going to be a text field. So if they don't pass the type prop down, then it will automatically, this prop will become text. And within our field, we're gonna put type as the type that we receive from the props. So right now, because it's not required, nothing breaks. However, for our password, we want to give a type property of password. And that way, now we have our input concealed. So now I think we have successfully made a Formik field, text field connected with Material UI. So let's get on with the harder one, which is to make now the select using Material UI. And before we go on, let me just erase these other examples I've had here. Let's just keep the name. Let's save, refresh the page. There we go. So let me show you guys why it's going to be a little bit more difficult to make this render select, kind of like what we did with our Formik field. So if you go back to the React Material UI website, check this out. So the standard field, we pretty much just use one component, right, from Material UI. Now let's go back to our menu on the left menus, go to input, and let's click select this time. All right, so this looks pretty simple here, but check out the code, source code. So if you check out the source code for this age one right here, we don't have just one component, but we got this form control outside, and then we have an input label just for the label. We have the actual select and the menu item. So these are all imported from Material UI. So that's why it's a bit more complicated. All right, let's make within our components, let's make a folder called RenderSelects. No, not RenderSelect, Formik Select. And within this, just like before, we will make index.tsx and also Formik select.css. So within Formik select.css, I'm just gonna make a class called Formik select, and just like with my, where did it go? Formik field CSS, I'm gonna put this margin 10 pixels 0 within our Formik select and close it because we don't need it anymore, I don't think. Now that I'm on Formik select index, let's do the import React from React. And I'm gonna do const Formik select, no props for now. So no need to type it for now. And return div class name of Formik select. Hello, Formik select. Let's just make sure that we could connect this successfully. Export default Formik select, and before I forget, let's import our CSS file. Import Formik select, like so. It jumped around right now because I'm prettier, so ignore that. Now let's go back to our app. I'm gonna close the CSS files because I don't think I need them anymore. So, and I'm gonna close my Formik field file and our index. So we just need app and Formik select. So go back to our app. And under our select div right here, let's first import Formik select from WAP one level Formik select. And below our select position select here, let's just use it. Formik select. Let's see if that worked. So we say hello from select. So it is connected now. All right, now before we connect Formik to it, let's just try to display this Material UI element. So what do we need? We need a form control, input label, select, menu item. You know what? I'm just feeling kind of lazy. I'm just gonna, let's grab this input label, menu item, form helper text, form control, and select. Let's grab all of these. We don't need the one above, but let's grab those. So input label, menu item, form helper text, form control, select. And using this as an example, let's erase our dummy text here, put a form control, make it open like that. We don't need to give it a class name. Let's put an input label. And we'll call it, should we call it position? And select, capital select. What do we need to give it a value? Should we give it a value? Nah, we won't give it a value for now. And let's add some child items. Menu item. I don't want to give it a value right now, although it might be a required property. Let's call it front end. This is the menu items that we're going to display to the user. Backend, DevOps, and QA. And by the way, I also want this required. Do you remember this from before? For later, our error message handling later. So how did they do that? So if we look down, we have this form helper text, and we gotta put that right below our select. And I'm gonna say our error message is just gonna be required. So notice we're all hard coding all this in. Obviously, we don't want to do that in the future, but let's see if that works. All right, so we got something going on here. It looks pretty hideous. It's too small, but at least the position label's working. These guys are working, although I can't really select them, and it says required. So that's good. Now, why is it so small? How do we make it bigger? So you probably have to do something similar with the full width, but I'm not sure where to pull this, put that. Sorry, I can't speak English today, but I have a suspicion that it's within our form control. So within our components, or rather, let's go to component API. This gives you a more detailed description of each of these components. I'm going to go down this alphabetical order. Let's go to form control. And let's see the properties that it receives. So it receives the full width property. If true, the component will take out the full width of this container. Let's do that. Full width. Yes, and now that looks much better, right? So we made this a select. Now we got to do the hard part of connecting this to Formik. And this will be a bit of a headache. But as a matter of fact, I changed my mind. Before we do that, let's think of our goal. Our ultimate end goal is to make this a reusable select field, right? But we don't want to hard code the menu item items like this. So how are we going to handle this? So what we're going to do is we're going to pass this as a prop. But before we pass that, let's start introducing types to this. So we'll call it interface Formik select props. And we know for sure that it's going to need a label, just like our Formik field, which is going to be a name and is required. And I'm going to start writing these one by one here. By the way, let's type our Formik select. It's a functional component, react.fc, and its props has a type of Formik select. I spelled this wrong. Formik select props, like so. Now let's destructure a label from it and use that label. Where did we put the label here? Input label. So let's use our prop label from here. By the way, I don't know why I called this name. This should be a string. And let's go back to our app. Now we have to pass in a label here, and we will call it position with a capital P. Like so. So now that's connected. And just to make sure that it's working, I'm going to change this to call it row. See if that changes. There we go. So now we're connected. I think I like row better, but I'll just go back to position. All right, so now that we have that connected, the question remains, how do we pass it? We want to make this a reusable component. How do we pass the items? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this accept items property, and this will be an object. This will be an object that has two key value pairs. The first one, I'm actually gonna make another type here. So I'm gonna call this type, actually interface Formik select items. And this will have two properties. It will have the label, which is a required string, And you will also have the name, which is the name that we're gonna put for our maybe name is not the right word. How about value? The value that the form will receive. This will also be a string. So our items property that we're gonna pass from now on is gonna be Formik select items. And let's destructure that from our props like so. And before we begin implementing how to use that here, let's do this. I'm gonna declare position items outside of our component. How about right here? Now we'll do it below this. Const position items. And if you want to be really hardcore with your typing, you could export this Formik select items here. Export Formik select items and import it from here as a named import. Formik select items like so. And we will type position items as Formik select items. And I think I made a mistake. It should actually be an array that gets this. So it's actually an array. Because we could have more than one items, and we will have more than one items within our select. So it would, and this will also be an array. And maybe then the better name for this is Formik select item instead of items, like so. All right, now let's begin typing. This is going to be an array. The first object gonna have a label of front end. That's what we display the user, but a value of front end like so. Let's use underscore. Copy this. 1 for backend. 2. We're gonna have 4 total. We're gonna call this backend. Backend, DevOps, DevOps, and QA. And now that we have declared this, let's pass it along as a property. Remember, we called it items, right? We'll pass along position items. So this should no longer error, but now we got the task of using this items property to show the different types of positions like so, instead of hard coding it like this. So the way that I'm gonna do that is within our selects, I am going to get our items and map it by getting each item and returning immediately the menu item that we're using for here. We have to give it a key because we're using a map on an array, and I'm gonna use a key of item.value like so. And here we're gonna display was it label? Yes, item.label as the display, what we display to our users, and menu item. How do we associate it with the value? How did we show the value? So I don't remember. So I'm gonna go back to my select, go to the source code, and look at this. And they use value. Oh, it just uses value. Okay, so we give it another property to our menu item called value, and we're gonna give it the item.value, and that should work. So let's erase these hard-coded menu items here, and let's see if that works. It seems to work. Oh, and yes, it seems to work. So it is working now. Just to make sure that it is working properly, I'm going to change this name to front end game. I got the end game, Avengers Endgame in my mind right now. Yep, and it works. So now we have successfully made it so that our reusable Formik select component, we could pass down items, which is an array of objects that has a label and a value. So I think this is pretty standard to make a reusable select component to pass down a prop like this. So that is good. However, we still didn't connect this to Formik. So for example, if I change the position here, if I write something and submit, notice I have put backend here. He has no idea what type of value that this field has because it's not connected to Formik yet. So now we got that task. But the reason why that is hard is if you look at this, let's compare. Let's go, let me just make this a little bit bigger. Let's look at our Formik field, which is this simple thing here. We are using this capital field component from Formik, which automatically passes down to the component that we're using, in this case, textField, the value property, the onChange property, and the onBlur property. It automatically passes those down, and textField component, which is a Material UI component, in turn uses them to show the value to handle the onChange event and to handle the onBlur event. However, and remember, we're using this as, it's telling Formik what to render this field as. We don't have a simple component to render it as here. We got a bunch of components here. And not only that, where do we pull, if we just pass, where do we pass the onBlur, onChange, and the values? So we gotta get creative with this. And that's why it's a little bit more difficult. So let me show you guys what I'm gonna do. Ultimately, I want to put a Formik field here and render this as something, right? So I am gonna make another component within the same file. Now, it's okay to make this within the same file because this will not be a component that I export to other places. This component that I'm gonna make right now will just be used for this Formik select. So let me think about a name that we could use. I'm thinking of maybe const Material UI select field. How about that? A little verbose, but we're only gonna use it once. This is gonna be a React functional component. And we got the issue of what the props is gonna be. But that's fine. That's fine. I'm not gonna type it for now. And I'm just gonna write props any. We'll type it later. And all right, so bear with me. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna grab this part right here, and I am going to paste it in our return value of this Material UI select field. But instead of using, so again, right now it's erroring out because it doesn't know what a label is and what an items is. But for this one, I'm not gonna pass in the items, and rather than rendering the items here, I'm just gonna pass down a children, like so. So let's start typing our Material UI select field. But this is what I'm gonna do. Interface, Material UI select field, props, and this will extend our Formik select. Actually, no, I changed my mind. Let's just leave it like that. It will also accept a label, which is a string, but it will accept children, which is a React React thing. Pretty much when you have a component that has, you could add stuff inside of it like this, where you could open it and close it, and whatever you put here, that's called a children. So a standard way to type the children is using React Node, which you can import from React like so. Notice up here, we are importing React Node. And let's see, let's begin. Let's type this now. Material UI select field props, and that is wrong. React.fc with the properties, this property right here. Now we don't need this anymore, and let's destructure the ones that we need. Label and children. All right, so that seems to be in order. Notice our form helper text is still hard coded in, not ideal. So let's just pass that on as a property too. We will call, I will just call this air string. And should I make this required or should I make this optional? I will make this optional and it will be a string value. So let's destructure that here. And instead of hard coding this in required, we will use air string here. All right, now I am going to be very careful, comment this form control out, and try to use my Material UI select field component here. Material UI select field, we need to give it a label. So I'm just gonna pass down the same label as before, like that. And because we gave it a children property, we're gonna pass down this part right here, our items. So copy that, paste that here, and that will be received as a children property, which in turn will be put here. Let's see if that works. So I'm gonna make this smaller again. And it seems to work. Now remember we gave it an optional air string property. So let's use that here. Let's see if that works. So we have Material UI select field, air string is gonna be test. And we got the test here, so that is working. All right, so now why did I decide, why is this airing out? Type tree is not assignable. Oh, that was just a WebStorm bug. All right, so why did we do this? We want to now convert this part right here. Instead of doing it like this, we want to use the field component that Formik comes with. So please, I hope that you're following along. Let's import that from our Formik. We don't have Formik here, so I'm gonna import it here. Import field, and I know that I need the air form. What's air message? Yeah, air message from Formik. So just like what we did with Formik field, we're gonna use this field component here. Now let me just open our Formik website as reference. So we are going to do something like this right here. All right, so I am going to comment this out. I'm scared to erase it, so I'm just gonna comment it out for now. And I'm going to use our field. So field, remember, always needs the name property. Let me just actually make it open and closing. And we're making the open and closing because we're gonna pass down the options, which again, we're gonna pass it as whatever we had before. Where did we have it? This items.map thing, right? We need a name property here, right? So we didn't type that yet within our form select props. So let's pass it name, which is a required string. So let's go back to our app. Now he is airing out for us because we gotta give it a name, and we will give it the name position. Let's go back to our form select. The structure from our Formik select, the name property, and give it that name. And what else do we need? Name. Oh, and we got to give it an as. And we will say this will be as Material UI select field, like so. And because Material UI select fields has a couple required properties, such as label, we gotta pass along label and an air string. But this is what we'll do with the air string. Just like before, we are gonna use the air message component because that returns a string. Let's say like that. And we're gonna give it the name of name that we have passed down. Let me use prettier just to make this a little bit more pretty. All right, so that's looking a little better. And within the child of our field, we're just gonna copy this items.mat thing. So let me uncomment this for now. Let's get this item stuff going on here and paste it in here. Let's see if that works. I'm gonna erase this now. Hopefully it works. and it seems to be working. It seems to be working. However, it's still not connected. I know that it's connected when I mess with this. The value within this component should also change because they are referencing. They have the same name in our form. They both have the name of position. Do you see this? So right now it's still not connected. And the reason why it's not connected is because remember what this field component does from Formik. It passes down 3 properties: values, onChange, and onBlur. But we're not using those here. So first we gotta set them as the props, which they are already technically here, because we use this field component. Oh, now we just gotta set them as props. So let's type that first. Now I could manually go to our Material UI select field props and put value here, onChange here, and type those manually. But Formik, because it's already made with TypeScript, it has its own type library. So I'm gonna go to our field and see which one we could use. Let's see. I think field props, interface field props. Field input props. How about that one? Yeah, so do you see this? So field input props takes a generic of value and it takes in onChange. It has onChange, onBlur, multiple, optional, checked optional, a name which is required, and value. So this is what we want right here. So field input props, that's what we want. And what does this value use for? This value, this type that this field input type interface uses is the type of the value. In our case, the value of what we write here is a string. So our value here that we're going to put is a string. So let's use that back to our Formik select. And we know that this will be part of our Material UI select field prop. So we're just going to extend this with field input props, which we will import from Formik right here. Remember, it accepted a generic, and we're going to say it's a string because we are saying the value is a string. Now we could freely, within our Material UI select field, have access to the value. Let's see. We also have access to the name, because that also came within our, that also came within our field input props. As you can see here, name, right here. Let me just erase these, close those other ones. And we also have onChange and onBlur. So those are the things that this field component passed along. So let's start using these here. Where do we put the name? We put the name, let me go back to our Material UI. Let's go to our component API, and I want to look at our the select component in more detail. So it accepts, for example, onChange of value, and I'm just gonna try it. So I'm gonna give it a name of name, onChange of the onChange. I'm also gonna give it an onBlur. I'm not sure if it accepts it or not, but I'll just try. And value will be the value. Let's see now if it is connected. And again, I know that it's connected. If I change this, this should change too. Still doesn't seem that good. I mean, not showing anything. Something moved. Let's try something else. Try that. So it doesn't really seem fully connected yet. Let's see what's going on. I'm gonna write the name here and submit. And it does say DevOps. I know what's going on. You know what's going on? So go back to our here. I use hyphens here, whereas in our Material UI ones, I use underscore. So that's the problem. So let's change these to underscore. And now let's see if it works. refresh the page, change the value, and now do you see this? This has become updated. So now we are fully connected. So that is very good. We are almost done. Do we have an error message? Let's see if we have an error message. I type something here. It's still disabled. Yes, now it says required. Do you see that? So error message is also connected. And the values of this is also connected. So that is good. All right, so just to make so we're pretty much done. We're almost done. I like this little asterisk thing that we put into our text field. I want to also have that in our position because I know this is required too. And as a matter of fact, to make this really reusable, why don't we pass that as a property? We can't assume that whenever they use this Formik field. So I'm talking back about the Formik field now. Let's go back to that. Back to our Formik field, we gave it this, let's see, Formik field. We gave it this required property, but I can't assume that it's always going to be required. So I'm going to pass that out as a property, required, and it's going to be an optional value. And we're going to say required is a Boolean, and I'm going to destructure it here. And I'm going to say it's an initial value or default value is false. So I'm going to say required is now the required property. The asterisk should go away, as you saw here, because we didn't pass it down. However, if we pass it down now within our app, go back to our Formik field, and let's write required here. Let's see if that works. Now you see the asterisk again. I want to do that with our renders Formik select here. Let's get rid of this old ugly select here. Now we just have this two clean Formik field and Formik select, and let's also pass required to this one and see how we can use that one. It's erroring out because we didn't type that yet. So go back to our Formik select now. We're gonna type our Formik select props with required optional one that is a Boolean. Within our not Material UI, but the Formik select, I'm going to destructure the required and say that it is default false. And where do we put this? Where do we put this in our Formik field? We put it within the field. So I'm guessing we just put it within the select. So I'm going to pass required down. And you know what? Why am I guessing? Let's just look at the API. I'm going to Google search required, and it is actually not here. So maybe then it is within our input label, because it's actually the input label that has a little asterisk, right? So I'm going to find within the component API input label. Let's check this one out. Does this one have required? Yes, now this one has required. So we're going to pass required to our Material UI field props, required. And this one will be, I'm going to say that it is a required value, not an optional. Because I know that even if it was optional to our Formik select, I am giving a default value to it. So now when we pass that required value to our Material UI, it will have a value. Like so. Requires a Boolean. Let's destructure here. And within our input label, we will pass the required prop. Like so. Now we get the little asterisks, a fancy asterisks here. All right. Just to finish up this form, so I think we did a pretty good job of making reusable components for Formik field and Formik select. Just to finish up this form, however, let's make this button as a Material UI button. So I'm back on the Material UI website. Let's go to components and go to button under inputs. And let's see, this one looks good, right? It's good enough. So I'm going to check the source code. And it's button. So we gotta first import that from Material UI core button. So I'm gonna go back to my app. I don't want to make a separate component for this because that's unnecessary. By the way, notice we're not using field and error message here any longer. So let's erase those from our inputs of Formik and import button. Let's, I don't want to erase the button yet. However, let's see, variant contained. I'm not sure what contained is, but I'm just gonna use it because they're using it here. Color primary, we're also gonna give it a disabled property with the same condition and a type of submit. So Formik will know that this one submits the form. All right, let's erase this old button and hope that it works. Refresh the page. All right, so now that looks pretty good. It's disabled right now, but once we have satisfied the criteria, it is enabled. When we click, it is connected. All right, guys, so I think we have successfully made reusable components, Formik components that uses Material UI as form elements. We made it for two specific field types, one a text field and one a select field. Now, as an added challenge, I challenge you guys, let's go back to our Material UI website. There are more than, obviously there are more than these two components. So we have things such as a date and time that does this fancy stuff right here. We have, here's an easier one, a radio button like so. And we also have a checkbox, another easy one. So as an added challenge, I challenge you guys to make these reusable components that connects with Formik. It should be fairly similar as to what we did here. You just have to look at the source code and see what goes what. So try to make these. And by the way, feel free to use these components. I will post this on GitHub. Links will be in the description below. And let me just tell you guys right now what my ultimate motivation was to make this. So I'm planning on making a full-blown Formik and Yup validation tutorial video. So when I was first learning Formik and the Yup validation that I needed to do at work, there wasn't too many videos that went too deep with Yup. So Yup is a very powerful validation tool that we can use with Formik. We could do crazy validation stuff. Pretty much anything that you could think of, you could do it in Yup. However, I noticed that there's not too much documentation. No, there is documentation online, but there's not too much video documentation on how to use Yup effectively. And so I want to make a video that shows you guys how to do that. We're going to go do all sorts of types of Yup validations. And I think, unless I'm misinformed, I think it's going to be the first YouTube video that show you guys just how crazy we could go with Yup validation. And also we're going to go into stuff like field array and things like that. So again, this type of code will be on GitHub, and look forward to seeing that video soon. I will try to make it soon. If you like my content, please click like below. That helps a lot. Stay subscribed to my content so you can see my featured videos. I release these React videos. I release JavaScript tutorial videos. Everything that you see in my channel will be about coding. So guys, thank you guys so much for joining me. This was extremely fun for me to make, and I will see you guys next time.